Hey, late to the party. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on the Supply Chain Buzz, here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Gregory, how you doing?
I'm doing quite well, Scott Luton. How are you doing?
It has been a good, busy, productive morning. We've got some good news.
Yep.
Peter's already weighing in.
About time.
Again,
Yeah.
it's gorgeous here in the Metro Atlanta area.
Chilly. We got a little burst of whatever you want to call it. Late winter here.
Agreed. And you know, it's supposed to hit 33 at some point this week, is what I heard over the weekend. So a lot
of hauling plants in.
That's right. But hey, great week here, and we love the buzz. I think we've got a special guest, and hey, we're in supply chain, so if we get a curveball, we'll just make the adjustment and keep trucking.
Yep.
Sarbjeet Johal is going to be joining us here in about 25-30 minutes, and if not, we got plenty to talk about today. Ain't that right, Greg?
I think so, Scott. It seems like there's a thing or two happening in supply chain today.
That's right. But hey, welcome everybody. We're going to say hello to a few folks here momentarily, and just a couple of friendly reminders. We go with the Supply Chain Buzz every Monday, 12 noon Eastern time. You can find us right here where we're tackling some of the leading stories that you want to keep your finger on the pulse of, and offer some of our take, especially an extra dose of Greg White's patented hot take. And we got some.
Going to be pretty toasty today.
So join us every week. And also, by the way, we've got a live stream every Thursday with a rotating topics. That's also at 12 noon Eastern time. And we'd love to have our community members and guests join us in the comments and share their take. We feature those regularly. So that's friendly reminder number one. And friendly reminder number two, Greg, is that if you enjoy our live stream, be sure to check out Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe for free, money back guarantee, and Greg, which we're going to touch on towards the end of today's show. Greg leads Tequila Sunrise, TECH, Tequila Sunrise.
That's right.
And Greg,
Tequila.
So in a small nutshell, very small nutshell, the size of maybe an acorn.
I know what you're saying by the way you say that.
What do folks hear? What do folks listen and hear about at Tequila Sunrise?
Well, look, if you're a founder, an investor, or a practitioner that deals with supply chain tech, then you need to listen to Tequila Sunrise. We talk about what's happening in tech, what tech can do for companies, how investment is being made, and how investors and founders, frankly, can work together to get more value out of these companies.
Yes. So check that out wherever you get your podcasts. It was nicely done.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Well worded, as always. I'm the one that struggles to keep things in a small nutshell around here. So a lot of good stuff.
We all do.
All right. So before we share the good news, let's say hello to a few folks here. Peter is already with us. Peter Bollet, the Suez cork has been pulled. Good start to the week. Good afternoon, all. Great to see you there, Peter. And Benjamin Goldklang, BG.
Holy mackerel. How's the weather up north, Benjamin?
Tell us, please.
I wonder if he's out for his run right now.
Run a couple
Probably
extra
not doing
miles.
as much early morning running up there as he did in Texas, right?
Mr. Goldklang, run a couple extra miles for me so I can get that in today as well. Jeff Miller, happy the ship is free Monday. Great to see you here, Jeff. Kavan is with us. Good morning, Kavan. Let's see here. Prerna is with us. Yes, finally, it's ships free. Good day, everybody. Great to have you here via LinkedIn. Utsav, also via LinkedIn. KV, or maybe VJ, he might go by. Great to have you here via LinkedIn as well. Spencer Ware, hey, I appreciate the feedback here. He says, thanks as always for providing great insight into all things supply chain. Great stuff. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Spencer.
And thanks for everything any of your relatives may have done as a running back for the Chiefs. Spencer Ware.
Let's see. Sophia is with us. Sophia, good morning. Last Monday in March. And by the way, I saw that you were leading facilitation in a live stream over the weekend, I believe it was. So great to have you with us, Sophia. Srinivas, Greg, is back with us. Great to have Srinivas. Let's see here. Davin is with us, of course. Can't do a live stream without Davin.
I was worried.
I was too. Rhonda, Dr. Bumpenza Zimmerman is with us here today as well. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and great to have you here. Oh, by the way, Benjamin's giving us a weather report. It's surprisingly warm as a Georgia boy. Perfect for a nice jog around the block, Scott.
Just the block, though. Notice that. You can get too ambitious.
Oh, that is right. And one final, hey, lovely comments. Appreciate everybody for weighing in. Yavir, let me know if I mispronounced that. Let's get this week started with good energy. Well, we're going to do just that. We're going to do just that because we've got some really big news. The story that has dominated the headlines has captured the attention of everyone on this planet. Well, the ship is free as of, Greg, about an hour ago, right?
Yeah, they freed the stern around 5:45 Egypt time, a.m. And Scott, as you noted, there was a lot of, shall we say, excessive exuberance around that. And the Dutch firm that was handling the salvage quickly tried to calm everyone about that because there was a lot of reports that it was free.
Yes.
It was simply floating, partially floating, and then they had to free the bow, which they did. I think they did a fantastic job doing that. I learned a lot about Suez Canal. I bet we all did during this time. In fact, this is in one of the sections where it is a single ship wide, and this particular ship is the largest. It's the largest allowed in the canal, 400 meters, 1,313 feet, and it drafts about 66 feet, and the canal is 80 feet deep only in the center of the canal, and then the sides go up at an angle relatively quickly. So
you're right. The salvage firm, I got Peter Berdowski, CEO of that firm, who's quoted in this AP News article. They did pull off their best Lou Holtz impersonation, right?
Yes,
downplay that news.
Down, people.
That's right. So this morning, in the earlier version of this story, he was quoted as saying, "Don't cheer too soon." He also was quoted as saying, "The good news is that stern is free, but we saw that as the simplest part of the job," end quote. But as Greg mentioned, just a few hours later, the whole thing is the canal celebrating horns. You'll see the video across whatever social media of your choice is, and that's good news. I would also add, Greg, in a different article, I think it was New York Times, they quoted several analysts, kind of generally speaking, that all of them pointed to today as kind of being that line of demarcation. If it was stuck still past today, it becomes from a big problem to a gigantic problem. And so that is interesting timing. $9 billion.
That's because there was a spring tide because we had a full moon, and the spring tide is the highest tide of about a month-long period. So the tide was about 18 inches higher than the next high tide would have been. And the concern they had was with low tide that it put a lot of strain on the ship because it was being supported on the ends and has 220,000 tons of cargo on it. 220,000 tons. I can't even do the math. It's a lot of pounds.
But so
yeah, there were a lot of concerns, and there were also concerns about how did this happen.
Yes. Well, so we're going to speak to that a bit, right? Before you go further, let me share some background information, because that's what I'm. Now that it's free, and we're hoping to see. It's not going to happen overnight, but all the congestion, I'm hoping they're going to be able to prioritize certain cargo that has been waiting. I saw lots of social media commentary around animal cargo, so we'll see how that happens. But $9 billion a day is reported to be the cost to global supply chains for as long as that ship was stuck. About 400 vessels are waiting. But I'm as of early this morning. But I'm curious to see how we can get to the root cause, because the operators of the Ever Given have thus far blamed high winds. But many, including Egypt's Suez Canal Authority, they indeed have the authority, are suggesting technical or human errors. And
had to be.
Yeah, and then the other data point, Greg, I want you to weigh in because Greg is our resident sailor, by the way, everybody. So not only do you get supply chain commentary, but he's he's led ships. But they also point to, and some security guards that were interviewed for this story pointed to that about 50 ships traversed the Suez Canal on the same day and had no issues. So lots of interesting. We want to prevent that from ever happening again. Really, at any canal for that matter. And then there's of course just differences between our critical canals around the world. But Greg, some of your commentary on just what happened.
Yeah, well, it was not high winds, I can assure you of that, regardless of whether they try to foist that story upon us, because thousands of ships a year traverse the Suez Canal in wind conditions of 30 to 50 knots, which is not uncommon in the desert. And also, there could be plenty of blame to go around because there is a Suez Canal Authority pilot on board the ship. Now, the captain is still responsible for managing the ship, but that pilot is responsible for guiding and advising during that time frame. So I think Jeff Miller mentioned something about that earlier today, asking the question. And yes, there are pilots, much like there are in locks and and other types of tight spaces.
Yes,
right. The Panama Canal as well.
Right.
So there was probably some combination of high winds and loss of control or power. Reportedly, a sandstorm blew through, which is going to happen when there's 30-knot winds. And so there was probably some perhaps loss of rudder or loss of propulsion that allowed the ship to drift as it did. So I think the bigger question that this prompts is why is a ship this large with 14 feet of draft below it? I mean, think about that. That's like if you had a boat that had 6-7 feet of draft, right, in 8 feet of water. I mean, there's very little room, and with the possibility of the bottom shifting, there's very little room for error there. And then, of course, outside of the around 80 meters of the central canal, the sides start to go up to a point where very quickly the ship cannot traverse the canal at all. So there's probably some engineering that needs to be done. Of course, this is a canal that's been around since the 1860s, I believe, 1859, something like that. No, wow. Sorry, not 1859, 1650. It's been around a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. And they've continued to widen it, but they've also continued to increase the size of ships. So there's probably some opportunity there. This ship will be guided very carefully to a place called Bitter Lake, where it will be pulled off to the side and significantly analyzed to make sure that it's safe to continue to traverse the canal.
And its crew will be administered corporal punishment, what I was reading this morning.
I would not want to be their crew. Yes.
Me neither. So. The eyes of the world are upon them. But I
think again, you have to acknowledge the fact that while they are solely in charge and the captain is solely in charge of that ship, he is subject to some oversight by the Canal Authority itself.
Right. Yes. Let me share a couple comments here. Andrea, hello, good morning, Andrea. Worst nightmare for customs and tracking team. Agreed. Kelly Barner, host of Dial P for Procurement, is with us here today. Good morning, Kelly. Rhonda says nothing should surprise us at this point. Agreed. Mervin agrees with Greg.
That's part of the next point I think we need to discuss is that we should not have been surprised by this. Absolutely correct.
Good point. Good point. Peter, dig it deep in cement wallet, then it will bounce straight, he says. Jeff Miller, bow thrusters are engineered to provide sufficient force to offset.
And this ship was equipped with them, by the way.
Yeah. M1, I don't, and just let me know if I get your name wrong. We'll reference as M1 for now. Vessel stowage and planning plans are still largely done by SMTP, insecure, broken, and manual. Interesting. And Suvesh has a different point when it comes to bow thrusters, nearly ineffective at 10 knots, he says. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share a little backdrop here. Came from your friend, Gregory. Let's see here if I can get this up. So I love a good visual.
Yes.
Yes. Peter, how's his last name?
Stongeland.
Stangeland, who's chief commercial officer over at DB Shanker. He posted this on LinkedIn this morning. And I think this is a wonderful visual because I think if you're like me, you forget where stuff is on the globe. And the Suez Canal, as he shares here, using Suez Canal, if you come from there, Rotterdam, around to wherever port of call in Taiwan, 10,000 nautical miles, about 25 and a half days. If you have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, which is also, from what I've read, dangerous in and of itself.
It is.
But it also adds a lot of time and cost. And we saw several dozen ships, Greg, decide to go ahead and bite the bullet and start that journey, right?
Yeah, it costs about for these ships. It costs them about $27,000 a day to operate, and they've just added 9 days. So figure that's an extra little over $250,000 to make that decision. So it's not an easy decision to make, obviously. So yeah, I mean it's a very interesting study. I mean, first of all, did anyone else know what AIS was, the Automated Identification System for Ships? That's how they could give us the pictures of those ships in the canal. That is a fairly new system that identifies a particular ship, its entirety of its size, and its precise location on the ocean. The part I love about that is it keeps big ships from running over little sailboats while out in the ocean.
Well, you referenced Jeff Miller. I want to share something so folks, we're going to, with regularity, maybe not every week, but we're going to try to invite you to share some of your key stories. And Gary, thanks for being Johnny on the spot there. 1869.
Yeah, thank you. My calculexia impacted me there. It was 1869. I was thinking it could have been 1689.
So just about every week, we're going to invite you to weigh in on what your important stories are that you're tracking and some of what your take is. And a couple folks answered the call, and this is in our insiders group on LinkedIn. And maybe we can put a link to that directly, Amanda, in the comments. But a couple people took advantage of that and weighed in. And I'm going to share that here. First, Jeff Miller says, quote, "We must return to core supply chain principles, information, inventory, capacity, reevaluate our decades-long globalization strategy, historically driven by labor, and find economically viable means to reduce today's risk concentrations. We're surely not going to place safety stocks around the globe to blunt the impact of another container ship getting jammed sideways in a canal." Agreed. Greg, your take.
Well, I mean, this is not a new problem. And Jeff, in his infinite wisdom, has identified something that if you've been involved with supply chain for any time, you should already know. And that, to me, is the travesty of this situation. We have allowed, and certain segments of the supply chain have been fairly sloppy with their management of it, we had somebody say so matter-of-factly on the show last week, I can't remember who it was, but it made me cringe when they say it. We all know supply chain has been a cost minimization exercise for all these decades, right? Which it has been in large part, frankly, but we need to have the recognition that what it truly is a risk management exercise. A small supply chain, Scott, I'd like to buy an apple from you. Greg, I have an apple. Here it is. Give me a nickel. And end of supply chain. When we have expanded now, and this was one of the brilliant things said also, when we have expanded the supply chain, we create all these potential failure points. And so we must provision for those failures. And that's what Jeff is talking about. And there are common approaches, which I'd love to share one. I don't know if now's the right time, but we can talk about it. We have one more article where we're going to talk about the companies that are succeeding and those that are excusing here in a little bit. We'll talk about it then. But there are common approaches that have existed in supply chain for decades before I was in supply chain. Any of us probably were in supply chain, that can mitigate even this risk. This catastrophic failure of the supply chain can be mitigated.
Yeah, it's interesting that the last 18 months, are certainly going to be changing the game dramatically in terms of scenarios that all the risk management modeling play out, because the things that were the what ifs that were never surfacing are now going to be surfacing. And we'd long heard about how chief risk officers were being added to organizations. Gosh, you would think of after the pandemic, of course, that'd be the case, but now things like this are only going to amplify that type of niche talent onboarding. I want to share, Greg, before we get too far, and we're going to share the other article here in a second. I want to share this take from Kavan. Now, Kavan did his Greg White esque hot take, and he says, quote, "Maybe ever given and the supply chain and logistical issues that have occurred, such as rerouting, time to market increases, price increases, and so on, all regarding our disruption. My Greg White-esque hot take is this phenomenon has led to increased transportation mode changes from marine to aerial as a reactive resilient strategy in response to such a disruption." And that is Kavan, who is working on his PhD now.
And he must be doing a hell of a job, because that's a great take. It really is a great take. And the key word there, the key word that we need to avoid is reactive. A reactive strategy. There's no such thing as reactive strategy. That's just my opinion. Resilience is a strategy. If you take reactive out of that, then resilience strategy makes perfect sense. But he's right. I mean, so many companies have relied on a reactive response approach to the supply chain rather than a preemptive one.
Agreed.
Let's get to that next article and talk about that.
Yeah, let's do that now. Let's see here. All right. So every time I see Williams Sonoma Greg, I think they've reversed the first name and last name White Greg. So tell us what's going on with Williams Sonoma.
Yeah, so this is a great example. It seems like, so many of you know that I post an article every day. I have a little newsletter that I put out, and I collect articles that I kind of tickle my fancy, and I post an article every day. This is one, and it seems like last week, Scott, the discussion was around whether companies were responding or stymied by what's going on in supply chain and all these disruptions, or whether they were succeeding by taking on a preemptive strategy. I had this thought: we need companies to stop focusing on being adept at making excuses and rather focus on adapting to exceptions. So I think if we cut a few words out there, we've got a t-shirtism, right? Don't be so adept at making excuses, adapt to exceptions. And there are great examples of companies who are doing the adapting to these exceptions. Williams Sonoma is one. Yeti, there was an article about Yeti, who is doing an outstanding job. They were rerouting ships around the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach to Houston. And then there were those who were not doing as great a job, Foot Locker and Nike, though that may be subject to the fact that the shoe industry is a shambles when it comes to supply chain. I've been dealing with retail and shoes for a lot of years, decades, and they're just terrible at it. So, but again, there are those companies who adapt to exceptions and those who are adept at making excuses. I think the whole point is here, let's be preemptive. Let's talk about strategies and put into place strategies that mitigate risk. For instance, a decades-long strategy that has existed in industries with very, very tight margins, rather than shifting to aircraft when shipping becomes more expensive or more delayed or whatever. What they've done is they have created a secondary source, a fill-in source, if you will. So give 80 or 90% of your POs to your primary source, 10 or 20% to a secondary source that has a much, much shorter lead time. Keep enough capacity flowing through that secondary source, and then when catastrophe hits, you shift more of that capacity to your secondary source. It's a common practice. It's been in practice in the food industry, which is a very tight industry, margin industry that can't afford incredible cost increases when catastrophe hits, it's easily adaptable. It's something I adapted. I kind of stole when I was in supply chain in the automotive industry, and we got, even back in the early 90s, we got so many of our goods from China. We would have some of them made in Mexico and other factories, and be able to shift sourcing and volume to those factories when something like this happened. You can even overcome a catastrophic event like this if you plan well enough. And that's what we need supply chain more focused on, and the executives who support supply chain leaders.
Excellent commentary there. Excellent. I want to share a couple of things here, a couple of comments here. So Daniel says supply Chisimos. Maybe that's a product. Very important to optimize the production in order.
That's a spell check error.
Okay.
I've learned how to translate spell check errors.
I go straight to productization.
My third language.
Daniel says very important to optimize production in order to offer a very good product to clients. Yeah, absolutely. And the more your production is optimized, the better position you're going to be able to handle when inevitably the curveballs come your way. All right, let's see here. Sylvia, great to see you here via Charleston. Hey, she's having systems issues, folks. We've heard from a variety of people, including other content creators, that LinkedIn has been a little bit shaky here lately. So we apologize in advance if it's impacting you as well. Nanda likes your point you made there, Greg. There is no strategy when there is reaction. And Nanda, great to have you here with us once again. David makes an interesting point. He says now that there's movement, he would think that the boats that waited there waiting for the Suez Canal to open up may end up ahead of those that opted to start the trek going around. Greg, I wonder, there's probably a point of no return, I guess, once you start. And look, I am not a sailor by no means. I've never piloted a container ship, but I imagine, even if they spend a day headed south around, it still might make sense for them to turn around and go through the port. I'm not sure how that works.
I would say that if they're still in the Med, or they're still in the area just outside the canal on the south end, they probably would They probably would do that. Once they've started, they may not. But the other thing that we don't know is how quickly, just because that ship is moving, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will release at full pace.
That's a good point.
In the canal. But to Davin's point, they'd have to have about another 3 days of delay for it to be equal.
That's a great point. I also wonder how that, if you lose your spot, so to speak, I'm not sure how the operations at.
I'm certain that you do.
Yeah. So
I'd be certain that you do. Yeah.
All right. So let's see here.
And I don't know. I mean, just for fun, if you are into sailing or into this, take a look at this Cape of Good Hope. I wish we had Jenny Froome here, because I feel like she could give us some insight on what it's like around there. Of course, the ships aren't near shore, and it's not nearly as bad as Cape Horn, where you're almost guaranteed to encounter a catastrophic storm or currents or seas. But it can be a quite dangerous passage.
So Jenny, if you're listening, fill us in, paint the picture of what it's like in that part of the world. AA in Wichita, Kansas, which we're going to touch on here in a little bit. This risky business and supply chain keeps us in business. Balancing demand with supply at minimum cost keeps us awake. Good stuff there. Sophia, adapt to exceptions. Well said, Greg. I completely agree. So Daniel has a question for us. In your opinion, what's the most important advantage of a very good supply chain?
Most important advantage. Man, I mean, if you have the most effective supply chain in your industry, then you have the best customer experience, at least the best shot at customer experience, because there's really only one metric of customer experience that makes all the other metrics meaningful, and that is putting the product in your customer's hand. That's all they want from you in the end, right? Now, how they get there, that can all be guiding, and that's largely self-serving. But at the end, what the customer wants is what they want, when they want it, at the price they want it. So
Agreed. Competitive advantage. That's if you've got a great supply chain. In my words, agree with Greg. That's the number one advantage of having a world class supply chain because it can impact every other aspect of the business, including getting great talent on board, which is a big part of the equation. Always has been. All right, let's see here, Mervin. Let's see what Mervin says. How much of he's asking Sophia, I think. So we'll come back. Sophia, answer Mervin's question, and then we'll come back to that. John Perry, strategic flexibility. You need to be thinking far enough ahead to be able to pivot towards alternatives. Absolutely.
Can I share another? I don't know if this is a T-shirt, isn't, but this has guided me in my entire supply chain career, and it was a very simple statement made by a very simple and yet brilliant person, and they said, when dealing with supply chain, assume that everyone will fail you and make provision for that.
I like that.
I mean, is it not the simplest strategy?
Yes, and a proactive one.
Right. It really forces that, doesn't it?
Right. Caitlin is with us here. So Caitlin was with us last Thursday on a live stream. She's with the Valvoline team. She said she totally agrees. It's about proactive planning for catastrophe, kind of what Greg was just talking about. Risk management is pivotal for supply chain professionals, as we've discussed before. Agreed. Y'all got to check out. Maybe Amanda and the team can post a link to that live stream in the comments here today. It was good stuff. All right. I want to share. Sylvia's got a great point here. My father, she says, was in the Suez Canal in 1962 on a certain on a Gustav Pister, must be a boat ship of some sorts.
Yeah.
He said that back then they had thousands of workers carrying the sand in straw hats. He sent me pictures that I would love to share.
Gosh. I would love to see that.
I would too. So please, Sylvia, if you can email those pictures maybe to Amanda, maybe we can get them on. Back then, 10 to 12 break bulk vessels passed through the canal, 10 to 12 of them. 60 years later, 50 vessels a day. Wow. How about that for perspective?
So by break bulk, I wonder if that means they had to take, because in those days, the canal was, again, much smaller. I wonder if they had to take product off of ships, put it onto ships specifically built for the canal, and then put it on other ships at the other end. I bet that's what they were doing. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing how far we've come. So let's see here. Ericara, I think if I said that name via Facebook, tuned in. Hey, it looks like you're frustrated with a shipment, but we don't ship anything here, do we, Greg? We broker content and expertise in all things supply chain. So hopefully you find
it must be really important because it's in all caps.
That's right.
My suggestion is you talk to your supplier.
There we go.
Or carrier.
Azalea, good morning. Great to have you here. She says, customer-centered supply chain. Imagine when we could get a product to a customer in an ideal time frame, no matter what corner of the globe they are.
That's coming.
Yeah, no kidding. And Sean says, website looks great. Well, thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. Big thanks to the whole team here, especially Amanda.
What? Is it up?
The website is up. The new website.
Oh, my gosh.
So hopefully it should be easier to find things and it should load faster, amongst other things. And hey, if you've got any things you want to point out of how we can make it even stronger, of course, we'd love to hear that feedback as well. But big kudos to Amanda and the rest of the team. But they
no doubt,
overtime,
no doubt.
Okay, let's take this question from Nanda here, Greg. Nanda says, due to COVID, do you think importance of risk management has increased in its awareness among chief procurement officers? How is this impacting the supply chain organization structure in global organizations? Greg, what's your take first?
I think it certainly has increased in awareness. What I question now frequently is whether certain organizations are still not trying to limp through with their previous cost minimization methodology. I mean, I think that's clear when you look at some of the companies. I mean, clearly some companies are succeeding at getting their goods through, even considering all of these disruptions, and some are not. So clearly some are clinging to the status quo. So I think from a structural standpoint, in terms of the organization, it's more mindset really than anything. Because if you have any piece of technology or any supply chain methodology worth its salt, it has a risk management component to it. Often, that risk management component is minimized or ignored in the spirit of cost minimization. So, but so many of even the ancient principles, Robert G. Brown and some of these old principles of supply chain management include a risk management element to it. So, I think the awareness is definitely there. The execution is there in select entities. Certainly, the organization needs to have its goals and KPIs changed in a lot of cases. And frankly, aside from that, I mean, changing goals and compensation for risk management will get you the result that you want, right? You get what you pay for.
Yeah, you definitely get what you pay for. I think an important part, and we've spoken to this a good bit already, Greg. If you think of risk management kind of as the umbrella on the front end of that risk identification, and really getting in very intentional in how you invest into identifying all possible risk, the risk we take on and encounter every single day in what I'll call routine, although I'm not sure what routine is these days. And of course, these one-offs that may just happen once every 57 years or first time ever. I think how supply chains, how global supply chains and their leadership truly invest in a very intentional and extraordinary manner to identify all risks, the very common risk, and then the one-offs, the black swans. So I think that's how supply chain leadership is being impacted. And there's also a comment here going back to what Nanda mentioned about chief procurement officers. We've talked a lot with Kelly Barner, who leads Dial P for procurement, about the role of procurement and how it's interwoven within supply chain. Kelly and Greg have had some great conversations there.
I think there are people who don't understand the difference between purchasing and procurement.
Agreed.
Right? I mean, between the purchase of finished goods and the procurement of the materials that build those finished goods, though. I mean, in fact, and in its simplest terms, that's the difference, right? So I think, and I know there are people outside of the craft that do not know that. So
agreed. And teams, leadership teams, executive teams are unaware probably of what you just shared there. So to Peter's point, I agree with Peter. I think we are going to see more chief procurement officers in organizations of really operations of any size. I think we're going to see a lot more.
There aren't more, frankly.
Agreed. Yeah, I think, and Greg, I think part of this is if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, just like we've said 1,000 times, we were surprised there weren't more chief supply chain officers. Right. So I think these functional, I think you're going to see kind of just beating the same drum. You're going to see organizations give these key functional areas, these key disciplines, a seat at the executive table, so that it can't be, so it's not in a blind spot anymore, especially so you can move an operation to be much more proactive, which Greg and many others were pointing out earlier today, and not be in reactive mode because you don't have an executive putting constant visibility on these various disciplines in global business today.
Well, and the truth is, a lot of companies don't recognize the need for something until a catastrophe happens. I mean, certainly not to demean executives, because they are much better than politicians, but politicians don't respond to things until it becomes in the public eye.
Right.
It's not dissimilar with a company, especially large companies, that they don't respond or attempt to preempt or manage something until it costs them a lot of money, and they go, oh, aha, that's a risk. Even though I guarantee you, somebody who probably should have been called a chief risk, chief procurement, or chief supply chain officer at the time was telling them about that risk. It's really hard to internalize that until it hits you. So, what I think successful companies will do is, as some of these ones we've held up, Williams-Sonoma, Yeti, and others, they will start to look for those other areas of risk, and they will try to mitigate those risks ahead of the next catastrophic failure.
Agreed. Great point there, Greg. All right, I want to move along to another talk about something that's in my blind spot. I want to share this, and Greg, you're our automotive enthusiast. This is an interesting story. It came to us via, let's see here, Mary Comans, who's in Pontiac, Illinois. Yeah. She's part of our community and part of our insiders group, and I had no idea. So, Greg, first off, any idea what palladium and rhodium are?
I have no idea what they are because I barely passed science. But I know that they are valuable, and I know they're key components of catalytic converters, and that this is not an uncommon practice. It seems like it must go through surges because this has happened before.
Well, first off, they are names indeed of highfalutin shopping centers around the Metro Atlanta area, but they also, as you point out, they're precious metals. They are precious metals. And Greg, I had no idea that these precious metals are key parts of catalytic converters. So a little bit of background for folks that may not be automotive gurus like Greg and many others, Peter and others in the comments. So catalytic converters have been installed on almost every car and truck in the U.S. at least since 1975, and they're charged with scrubbing the pollutants, especially the most toxic pollutants, from your automobile's exhaust. Well, the thing is, these precious metals, well, production's been low because many of the mining operations have been devastated with the pandemic. So supply is way down, pricing is way up, and according to the New York Times, and thanks to via Mary Comans, it's leading to a crime spree across the U.S., including, Greg, Wichita, Kansas. Converter thefts almost tripled in 2020. Coast to coast, they point out South Carolina, they point out St. Louis, and if you do a search in the news section, you'll see a slew of stories. They just shut down a major catalytic converter
theft ring.
I mean, how nuanced are these professional crime organizations these days? So,
well, I just want to be clear on one point, Scott. I have nothing to do with anything being stolen in Wichita, Kansas. So,
okay. Well, hang on.
As far as anyone knows.
So, Greg, I'll vouch for you. So,
thanks.
So, if I can find the comment here, Nerfad, so it even hit our community. Nerfad, who's with us, his catalytic converter got stolen 3 weeks ago. And folks, if you read this article, and maybe we can drop, I don't know if we got the article handy, but it's from last month in the New York Times. These folks, the criminals, just as the headline kind of lays out, they just kind of slide up under your car, and the converter in many of these automobiles is very exposed. A couple of snips with probably like
bolt cutters or a hacksaw or
something like that, and the converter's gone. And they had some interesting pictures on in the article. So Nerfad, so tell us if you hadn't already. I'm gonna scroll and see if he's. So tell us. I would assume the car does not operate without it. And did you? Got
it does. It's just very, very loud.
Oh,
I mean, the catalytic converter, what it does is it cleans the exhaust. It cleans the exhaust before it goes out of your exhaust pipe. That's the point. It takes a lot of the carbon emissions out of the air.
Nerfad says he thought it was just a coincidence, but it's been happening in their community there, and he is in Canada, right?
Yeah, he's Toronto. So an AA needs to start parking inside.
That's right. AA, who is in. That's right. Their capital of the world in Wichita, Kansas. So just a holy cow. And by the way, the article also mentioned that because of they're still in all the cars are being sold today, even though the industry is making a big shift to electric, it's causing new car prices to go up because of just how much the precious metal commodity pricing and supply has been impacted. So it's everywhere you look. Back to Rhonda's point about we shouldn't be surprised anymore. I will be really disappointed if I wake up one morning and someone has snipped the catalytic converter out of the Supply Chain Now mobile. Greg, that van. That would kind of ruin your morning, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I'm thankful that I can park in a garage, but I have 2 cars in my driveway in case anybody wants to come by. I'll be sitting on the side porch
with a cup of coffee for them, right?
Coffee. That's what it'll be. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, hey, y'all, let me know if y'all are like near FOD. Let us know if you've been impacted.
That's incredible.
That's
That
crazy.
seems so old school. I mean, not that I want to start a whole nother ring, but there's gold in them airbags. So people were stealing airbags, and here in the Atlanta area, we've had people stealing old and sometimes working homes, stealing the air conditioning units because there's copper piping in those things, right?
I had no idea. Well, I wish I had the video. I saw something over the weekend where there's a couple of mechanics that were cannibalizing an old automobile, and this thing at the tire, it was clearly beat down, tires were off, everything. Well, the airbag in the passenger side was still very active, and as they were trying to take a piece off the dash, it blew the guy in the back seat. It was so funny. He probably had to go change his britches. I know I would have, but we'll have to get our hands on that fabulous bean footage. Okay. So, hey, sometimes Murphy's Law happens, and our guest got predisposed. We were gonna have Sarbjeet Johal come in and join us and share.
I think we're doing a pretty good job of carrying this, though, don't you think?
Well, hey, we were prepared, right? We were prepared, and we've got one other really cool event that we want to share with all of y'all here. And Gary says, "Great, hey, are we gonna have to be putting kryptonite locks on our catalytic converters?"
Oh
now?
my gosh, remember that? I met the person. Remember the lock that you put on your steering wheel?
Yeah.
So, of course, when I was in the automotive aftermarket, automotive retail trade, I met the person that invented that. I forget what that's called. I can't remember.
It had an infomercial.
But that's what he's talking about, is those locks you used to put on your steering wheel back in the 70s and 80s before.
Yes.
Right?
We'll have to figure out what that was. We'll also, we'll have Sarbjeet on a future episode to talk top tech trends. He just shot a note, and he's been predisposed. So hey, that happens. Everybody's busy these days, and Murphy's Law intervenes. But Greg, we've got a really cool event coming up. I think I've got the graphic around here somewhere. Dive deep. Take your shot. Tequila Sunrise. And I love this. But by the way, I love all of your promo videos. I've got to elevate my game a bit, because you've created a cult following on our team and beyond across the globe. So tell us what is going to take place with this Take Your Shot on April 28th. Is that right?
April 28th at noon Eastern time. So, and we'll do it the last Wednesday of every month. And on Tequila Sunrise, as I said earlier, we try to speak to founders and investors and practitioners about what's going on in supply chain tech. And I work with a couple of venture capital firms, and Enrique Alvarez works with a couple of venture capital firms. And we're sitting around. We may or may not have been sipping tequila at the time, but we were just sitting around thinking about how could we, do something fun with these companies. And this is an opportunity for companies to take their shot, to share their company story. They've got 3 minutes to tell the entire story of their company to our judges, and the judges will evaluate and respond and discuss the pitch. And they may even be in the process of actively asking for funding, which gives them a great stage to put their company in front of the investment marketplace. So it's a great opportunity for companies to come and share. We skipped March, but in February we did kind of a pilot. We're refining that, and we'll release the refined version in the end of April. Thank you to Peter Bollet and Kelly Barner and a number of folks, Corinne Bursa and a ton of others who gave us a lot of feedback on how to make it effective for the audience as well as for the founders. And by the way, if you're interested in pitching to our judges, you're welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn. My suggestion is you get your together before you do it, because this is a no holds barred. We have our very own Mr. Wonderful Balaji Gopinath, who will tell you exactly, precisely what he thinks of your pitch.
Yes.
So be ready. This is no holds barred. It is real. We want to make you ready for the investment world. So please, if you're interested in doing it, if you're interested in investing in supply chain tech, if you're just interested in watching people do this, in putting their life's work out there for 3 minutes and then letting 4 expert judges, 3 or 4, depending on the show, expert judges evaluate that, it is great entertainment. I do it all day long, as you all might know. And so I'm going to kind of sit back and let the judges take this, but I'll be hosting the way through this. So,
and those are agave plants, not cannabis, I believe, on the promo.
Well,
Although
there's
cannabis is
7
hot
leaves
too.
on cannabis. I'm guessing there are.
So hey,
As
y'all
I've said before, I wasted my youth not getting wasted. Yes, seven leaves on agave or on cannabis, but those are, yes, agave plants.
So y'all check it out. Join us live stream. It's like
Both have the net same effect, though, Scott.
agreed.
I'm just going to tell you.
April 28th, 12 noon. This channel, special edition of Tequila Sunrise. So y'all check that out. All right. So we've got the club.
The club, that was it.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna pose
There you go.
Club.
Sorry.
Or slipjack or low jack. I was gonna pose all 3 of those to you, but looks like Bob Whitmore got it right. It was the club.
Yes. I met the person who invented the club. Strange dude, but I guess it takes all kinds.
Greg, you have a pallet offer. How much you want to let that pallet go for?
You know what, Nerfod, it's obvious that you've been away for a while, because Gary Smith would probably outbid you for it. He's very, very interested in this. Actually, what we're thinking about doing is tying some, like a AIS or RFID to it and shipping it around the world like people do Flat Stanley with their little kids, and having people take pictures with the pallet around the world.
Love it. Love that
that's
idea.
Not a bad idea, is it?
Gary, by the way, says the kryptonite lock is a bicycle.
Oh, right.
Became famous because they claimed no one could break it. And
yeah, I had a bicycle with a kryptonite lock on it once. Guess what?
He got taken. Low Jack is a radio tracker for cars, and we have a late breaking update here. Let's see. Evergiven is out of the Suez Canal. Thanks, Mervin. Everglobe is just entering, and Mervin got your LinkedIn note earlier today. Hey, we're happy to talk with students as often as our schedule allows. So if that means next academic year, hey, no worries. We'll be ready whenever you and your university colleagues are. Okay, so Greg, that we've kind of rock and rolled through the supply chain buzz today. We've got a great week of production that lies ahead. Mm-hmm. I'm talking this afternoon with the founders of Fleeting and Higher Ground, both that have relocated their headquarters here. Pierre Laguerre is founder and CEO of Fleeting, and Chloe Guidry, I think I've got that right, is founder and CEO of Higher Ground. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll be recorded. It won't be live, but we'll be releasing that in the next couple of weeks as part of our Supply Chain City series.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because the gentleman that you talked about earlier, Peter Stangeland, is predominantly in charge of supply chain sustainability at DB Schenker, and we will be releasing an interview with Peter in the next couple weeks as well. He is part of what I call a supply chain power couple. He and his wife are both in supply chain. She was first, and he has gotten into supply chain since. But DB Schenker, if you don't follow Peter, go ahead and do what they're doing. Peter is predominantly based in Oslo, Norway, one of my favorite cities on the planet, and one of the most sustainable, friendly places on the planet. And if you decide you're going and you want restaurant recommendations, look me up. But what they're doing there is incredible. They get award after award for it. They are very, very aware of it. Peter is very focused on it. And when he is focused on anything, stuff happens. So
outstanding. Well, I look forward to that episode for sure. And I love the notion of a supply chain power couple. The world needs more of those, right?
Yeah, Lorna is she ran a very, very large 3PL in Norway. One of my favorite causes. They have a state liquor board there, and she ran the 3PL that handled all of the liquor into Norway, which, as you might not be aware, is no small logistical task, because almost no liquor is made in Norway except for some moonshine stuff and a particular aquavit, which is this awful tasting black licorice flavored booze. Yeah, it's a liqueur. I'm not a black licorice fan.
No,
I was forced to drink it many times while eating rotefisk.
Red licorice, yes. Black licorice, no, thank you. Let's see here. I wanted to ask, so right before we close here today, Sophia has a question for you on the Take Your Shot. What's the minimum investment? She's counting her cents, she says.
Minimum investment, gosh, I don't know. We're not really asking, the first three companies didn't really ask for any investment. I think they were kind of between raising rounds. So you don't have to actually be asking for funding. If you just want to put your company out there and it's a supply chain tech and you want people to know about it, that's sufficient. You don't necessarily have to be asking for investment. But if you do have a company and you want to get people interested in investing, anyway, look me up. I can tell you whether it's worthwhile for you to do it.
Awesome. And we've got a comment here, separate note. Any talk on U.S. stopping trade with Myanmar?
Myanmar.
Sorry, I just noticed on as was scanning this as you were answering Sophia that as of about 45 minutes ago, after a violent weekend, the U.S. government has stopped trading with the country of Myanmar. So a lot more will come on that. Maybe we'll cover that on
I'm sure that has far more impact on them than us.
Yeah, well, good point. Maybe we'll mention that and dive a little deeper on Thursday's live stream, perhaps. But thanks for
notorious. That area of the world is notorious for piracy.
Yeah, great point. Excellent point. And thanks for sharing. Whomever shared that, I couldn't see who that LinkedIn user was. But everybody, thanks for joining us here on The Buzz. Be sure to come over to supplychainnow.com. Check out the new website. Let us know what you think. You should be able to find all of our episodes: Tequila Sunrise, the main channel, This Week in Business History, Digital Transformers, Tech Talk, Supply Chain is Boring, which we all know. We all can laugh at that, and much, much more. Check it out at supplychainnow.com, where we're working really hard to serve as the voice of global supply chain. All right, so Greg, as we wrap here, you've got this gorgeous Metro Atlanta day. It's brisk out there, at least when I was out there earlier. What are you doing this afternoon?
Well, I'm going to be working on a couple of episodes here, and I may get outside. It's only going to be 65 here today, so gosh, feels good to say that. It was 82 over the weekend, so so now we think 65 is cold.
Yes. And a really hot.
But yeah, I'm going to be working hard this afternoon, Scott. I know that sounds unlikely, but as it turns out, I'm getting a few messages here from my daughter Delaney, who counts on the internet for her work. So apparently, I'm going to be restarting the router after we get off the air, because I think I'm the only one in the house with internet, because I'm wired and our wireless appears to not be performing very well.
Hey, we can't.
So I got to put on my mechanic gloves, and I'm going to take the catalytic converter off of our router. I'm going to go down and sell it.
Well, hey, everybody. Hopefully, y'all have enjoyed this episode as much as I have, and we have. Thanks so much for all the comments and the perspective that our community shared and all the guests shared across the comments here on the Supply Chain Buzz. We will see you Thursday at 12 noon Eastern time. Topic and guest to be determined. But hey, whatever you do, make this week a great week. On behalf of our entire team here, Scott Luton, Greg White, Amanda, Natalie behind the scenes, the whole team, have a wonderful week. Do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.